allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon. Sorry, our work session went a little late, so we're a few minutes late starting our meeting. We did not have anybody wishing to address the board, Vicki, correct? So we'll move on to approval of the minutes for the October 2nd meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes of October 2nd signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Board Member Tolke and a second from Board Member Parker. All those in favor of approval of agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. No new conflicts of interest. Move to the 7A, B, and C, approval of the consent agenda.
Still moved.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Ryder, second by Board Member Tolke. All those in favor of approval of consent agenda, items 7A through C, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now to the reports of the president. First, I'd like to acknowledge the award announcement, or your notification that STI was made the Aspen list for this year. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
You and your team.
President Mickelson, board members, good afternoon. I just want to do a quick introduction for our first presenter, Scott Delores, and he's the Deputy Director of the South Dakota State Board of Technical Education. And so Scott does a number of jobs at the state level very, very well, but a lot of it is in data and research and helping us make our case in terms of the investment of the state's resources and that return on investment. And one of the big projects he was involved with this past summer was in relation to, I think, a very important topic related to dual credit and the investment that the state makes in our students in dual credit. So he has some very interesting findings, and with that, we asked him to come in this afternoon. He drove through some bad weather to get here, so I want to especially say thank you for his effort. Scott?
Well, thank you, President Griggs. Madam Chairperson, thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about dual enrollment. As President Griggs said, my name is Scott Delores, and I work with the South Dakota Board of Technical Education as Deputy Director. So we're partners in this shared governance model. That's kind of how we articulate it as, right? Kind of the stool in which leadership to the technical institutes exists. And on behalf of the board, we're really grateful for your partnership along the way. So President Griggs reached out and asked us to deliver a kind of an executive summary of a report that our office recently published called Accelerating Opportunity. And it's entirely centered on dual enrollment because we believe that dual enrollment does exactly that, right? It accelerates the opportunity for students both to post-secondary education, but also through. And the data in this report really affirm that. So I'm going to spend some time walking through that. But before I do, I just want to maybe contextualize this a little bit. I'm a former high school speech and debate teacher. And as a former teacher, I worked with dual enrollment, right? I had students in my classrooms, and I didn't necessarily teach dual enrollment, but we interacted with them. And I never thought I would be kind of on this level now, analyzing dual enrollment, but from a teacher's perspective, it has incredible value. And not only from a state perspective, but from an economic and workforce development, dual enrollment really does serve as an engine. So we're grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. Just a quick overview of some of the pieces that we're going to walk through. First is student spotlight. So I have a couple of students that I want to introduce you to that are Sioux Falls School District students. So they're current students here within your district that are engaging in dual enrollment opportunities. Some findings from the study. I promise this is not a dissertation. I'll try to make it as enjoyable as possible. And then 3, just some recommendations moving forward. So again, these are real Sioux Falls School District students. And I've de-identified them, and they have generic names. But Jane's a current Avera Academy student, and she's actually been accepted to Southeast Tech into the diagnostic medical sonography program. So we're glad and really grateful she's going to join our system. She's currently taking 4 dual credit courses. The first one is medical language pathways to the future with Avera, speech, and college algebra. So she's got a robust load, but she's doing everything right. Again, we're going to circle back to that as well. And you likely know this, but Avera Academy gives students a chance every Friday to shadow different career opportunities. So some great career information and exposure. And then lastly, we see dual enrollment, effects of dual enrollment also kind of bleeding into students' work-based learning experiences. And we know for students' development that that's a critical piece, that they're actually on the ground and they're engaging in actual quote-unquote work. So Jane had the opportunity to be employed with Avera over the summer. So again, that's a great pathway into a career. The next student is John. John was in the construction pre-apprenticeship program for the last 2 summers. So the first year covers some basic construction, and then the second year gets a little bit more advanced into the residential. He's received 10 credits toward his Construction Management Associates of Applied Science, and that's 1/6 of his entire degree, right? So that may not seem like a lot, but again, it's 1/6 of an entire associate's degree. And the cool part is that either the contractors or the Associated General Contractors of South Dakota pay for students to engage in those opportunities. And that's really critical when we think about the demographic characteristics and the socioeconomic status of students who are engaging in dual enrollment. Again, we're going to come back to that. And in addition to those technical education, he's also engaging in general education. So he enrolled in social problems, which is a sociology class. Again, kind of a beautiful medley of courses. And again, we're going to continue to walk through, and I've purposely selected these because we think that they're model students and really a framework for us as students are engaging in dual enrollment. All right, so we'll jump into some findings from the study. And here's what all the national literature around post-secondary retention and progression and completion really support. And if students finish their first year with less than 20 credits, it's a serious drag on completion. And this is research out of the U.S. Department of Education. It's perhaps the most cited research as we think about pathways to degree completion. It's called the Toolbox Revisited by Dr. Adelman, again, kind of a seminal work. And the conclusions of that research really affirm this really beautiful quote: 6 is good, 9 is better, and 12 is almost a guarantee of momentum, right? Momentum is at a moment. So we see these like 6 is good, 9 is great, and 12 almost guarantees a pathway into that next step. So that really framed this analysis as we were working through it. So I want to start with kind of the basics. Dual enrollments, dual credit, dual enrollment, dual credits often referred to in various terms, so I thought I would start with some definitions. So the first one is, what is dual enrollment, right? Dual enrollment is essentially when high school students are engaging in college-level coursework as a secondary student, right? So they've got a foot in both lanes. They're both engaging in their high school curricula, but they're also engaging in that post-secondary curricula. In most, but not all districts, the credit is accepted for both their high school credits, right? So if I'm taking college algebra, it's counting toward my 4th credit for math alongside of the college credit. So we really recommend that if the districts across the state, that's a local decision whether they do that. The model of dual enrollment works best when students are earning both credits, right? Both their high school and the post-secondary credit. So that's a high recommendation. When I use the term dual enrollment, I'm referring to both dual credit and concurrent credit. So in South Dakota, and these, like all things, we like to fiddle with things. In other states, these are kind of synonymous terms. They're used interchangeably. In South Dakota, they've really evolved to be two separate things. So in dual credit, which is commonly kind of referenced as state-sponsored or really the 4833 that everyone talks about, that is through a program called the High School Dual Credit Program. And the High School Dual Credit Program is generally taught by a post-secondary technical institute or university faculty member, and the curricula is supervised by the post-secondary institution. So generally, these students are attending a campus, or they're taking it online. So who's eligible? Students grades 11 and 12. High School Dual Credit Program, right, state-sponsored, does have some limitations on who can engage. And then the cost is $48.33 per credit. So if it's a 3-credit course, that's generally $150, which can be a substantial barrier for some students yet, alongside the textbooks and related course materials. And who pays? It's a combination of really 3 entities in some situations, but it's generally the student pays the $48.33, and then the state has a specific appropriation. We expect legislation this upcoming session around the high school dual credit program. So we're certainly we're strong supporters of the dual enrollment program, and we would ask that you walk alongside of us in that process as well. Concurrent credit is a little bit different than dual credit. So concurrent credit is both the post-secondary institution and the school district supervises the curricula, right? So generally it's a joint agreement, there's an MOU established, things like that. But the main difference in concurrent credit is the high school teacher teaches the curricula, right? So in dual credit, generally the technical institute faculty member are. In concurrent credit, it's the school personnel, right? School district employees. And then concurrent credit's a whole nother ballpark. There's lots of variance in who pays, right? Who's eligible, and then what the cost is. It's generally based on the MOU that a post-secondary institution has with a district. So that's a lot of kind of definitions, but I think a good foundation as we build on. So just a little bit about this study. So this study examined, it's the most comprehensive analysis that our office has certainly done on dual enrollment, really because it's the first time we've had an opportunity to have a 3-year span of dual enrollment students, right? So the dual credits program started in 2014-15, the academic year, and we just reached 150%. So same enrolled in associate's degree, right? And that's a benchmark in post-secondary education is generally 150%. So if it's a 2-year associate's degree, finish in 3 years. So in total, it's about 3,700 students. So that's good size for analysis like this. Only dual or concurrent credits that met a student's post-secondary program of study were analyzed. So a student may have completed more credits, but if those credits aren't transferring toward his or her post-secondary program of study, they're not null, but it doesn't necessarily contextualize the data as well as it should. Students were grouped into credit ranges. So for example, a student entered with 4 credits, he or she was entered into the 3 to 5.5. That's a kind of a small metric, but it'll make sense on the coming slides. And the dual and concurrent credits could come from anywhere. So they could have came from a university, from a technical institute, from a school district, or a combination of all 3. We didn't say, we're just gonna limit it to technical institute dual credit. We said, we don't really care, right? We're in this is a joint program. We're all in it together. All right, so we've broken this, kind of the findings into 3. The first one is to engagement, and this is all about which students are engaging in dual credit. And you have the comprehensive report in front of you. For the purposes today, because again, I didn't want to deliver a dissertation, I've pulled some main points out to kind of inform our discussion. So things will look different, but in a future reference, if you want something to fall asleep to, you've got the report in front of you. So as we think about first generation, right, as we think about all the students who are engaging in dual credit, we looked at first generation status. So first generation, right, essentially did one or more parent attend post-secondary education. And what we see are some pretty substantial inequities related to the students who are engaging in dual enrollment opportunities. So you can see that in almost every section, first generation students are about half of their non-first generation peers. And while this wasn't a qualitative study, I think we can all kind of make an assumption that if you're a parent and you've navigated the post-secondary institutions and post-secondary education, you're a little bit savvier than parents who haven't. So having a parent is a substantial leg up right away. So again, about 50% in almost every grouping of dual credit courses, right, or the number of students, the number of credits a student starts with, we see some inequities there. So Pell and expected family contribution, these in higher education are really a proxy for socioeconomic status. So generally on a K-12 level, we really work with free and reduced lunch. That's generally the metric. In higher ed, we use the Pell and expected family contribution. And again, we see some substantial inequities, which is kind of scary, right? And something we're working on a state level on to kind of strategize around how do we engage those students who could be most benefited from the program. So Pell grants, federal dollars that the federal government subsidizes a student's tuition with. They are a grant, they're not a loan, so a student doesn't have to pay them back. So you can see the dark green line are the students who are eligible for Pell. So generally these are lower socioeconomic status students. And then the lighter green are Pell ineligible. And we see some stark differences when we get to the expected family contribution. So the expected family contribution is, it's got a really complicated calculation methodology that the federal government uses, but expected family contribution is how much the federal government thinks that a family could contribute toward post-secondary education. So I've highlighted just one example, and it's kind of hard to see, but if we look at the credit range, so students who are matriculate or starting college with 3 to 5.5 credits, students who are Pell eligible, their expected family contribution is about $3,100. And the students who are Pell ineligible, their expected family contribution is just over $25,000. So that is a $22,000 difference between our Pell eligible and our Pell ineligible populations, and that's frightening, right? Like that's a pretty substantial difference. All right, so the last metric within this section is race and ethnicity. And this is very difficult it's not very sound in terms of research design because our population sizes are so small. But these initial data really do reflect some inequities from a racial and ethnic perspective. So you can see our largest demographic are, of course, white students. And 1,900 of them started with 0 credits. So that means about just over 1,300 of those white. So that's our largest. So white students are primarily starting college with high school or with dual credits. But then you begin to get into some pretty substantial differences for other minority populations. So again, something we're certainly thoughtful about it. How do we address this on a state level? Before I transition, any questions around the sort of the demographic characteristics? I was a speech teacher, so generally my kids were not shy. So at any point you have questions, please feel free to interrupt. The next one is dual enrollment, and we're specifically looking at cohorts and entry-level course completions. So I'll unpack that a little bit. So we took sort of a 3-year lens, and you can see the cohort is broken up, the number of students, the total of credits that they matriculated with, and then we did an average of that. So we see an increase as students navigate, right, as the high school dual credit program really gains its legs. We're seeing that more students are engaging in dual credit, but we're also seeing them start college with more credit, so that's a good sign. We started in 2015 with about 2.18. And then 2017, fall 2017, we're at 2.75. So that's a 0.5 increase, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but can be a pretty substantial difference at the grant on a systems level. So cohorts, year and credit ranges, you can see that for the most part, students, we see increases in every single one of those credit ranges. But we also see, so while we see students are matriculating with more, except for N1, we're also seeing more students who are matriculating with 0 credits. And we're assuming that as institutions, right, we see a lower socioeconomic status students, Pell eligible, minority populations are engaging, right? And that's really kind of how we're thinking. We've got to do a little bit more analysis on why that population is growing as well. So if I lived in a utopia, all students would graduate with 12 credits. 6 of those credits would be their gateway, their entry-level math and English. Those are substantial barriers for some students. and then 6 credits in technical education or career in technical education. I'm a little bit biased, but the research certainly supports that, so I'm going to roll with it. We see more students are matriculating with their English and math completed, and this is a really strategic step from not only districts, but also from the students' perspective, because we see that their retention rates are higher, their completion rates are higher. So if you can get those entry-level math and English courses done when you're in a secondary environment, it's going to pay its dividends in the post-secondary environment. We don't dive into this, but there's additional data in that report about crosswalks the math and English completions with completion rates, and that's some pretty interesting data. All right, dual enrollment retention progression and completion. This is the exciting stuff in the report. So retention, right, you see I'm getting some laughs there. Retention and graduation from year 1 to year 2. So in a technical institute world, a fall-to-fall retention rate is not always a good metric because some of our programs are 12 credits or they're a 9-month diploma program. So we really break this out of was the student retained, did they graduate, or were they not retained? So you can see some good progress. So in the very left of this chart, you'll see students who are starting with 0 credits. And we see that 51% are retained, 16 are graduated, 16% of that population is graduated, and 33% were not retained. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they stopped post-secondary education. It just means that they didn't necessarily continue on at the same institution that they had started with. So progression and so credit accumulation is essentially you're accumulating credits as you go, right? So what we know is if students end that first year with less than 20 credits, it's a substantial barrier, it's a drag on completion. But what I like about this, right, is even after you factor, you look at the students, the credit range of 0, and you look at their average credits completed at year 1, it's 28. But then you look at our lowest number of credits, right? The 0.5 to 2.5, you see that they're completing 35. So that's 7 additional credits. So it far outweighs, right? The benefits of dual enrollment far outweigh just the actual credits. And of course, you get into completing more credits later, but that's just such a start. It's 7 more credits on average. So completion time to degree, 100%. So 100% is an education vernacular, right, post-secondary ed. So if it's a 2-year associate's degree, they're completing it in 2 years. So you, again, can kind of see some substantial differences. So students who started with 0 credits at a 53% graduation rate within 100%. But then you jump over to students who started college with 9 to 11.5 credits, and their graduation rate at 100%, 79%. So that is a 26% difference. That's 1 in 4, right? That's a big number, a big difference there. We see this continue with time to degree in 150%. So again, a 2-year associate's degree in 3 years. The same holds true, right? Students who started with 0 credits completed 59% of those students, and then 81% of the students who started with 9 to 11.5 credits. Of course, student loans are a major barrier for some students, right? But we also see, we looked at all the students who graduated, who completed their degrees, and we can see some pretty substantial dividends here as well, right? So students who, the 0.5 to 2.5, I'm kind of curious on why there's a spike there, but you see just a substantial drop after that, right? So students are saving on student loans. And as someone who's paying off a few of those, I can appreciate that of this program too. So I'll sum it up, the 3 takeaways. While more students are starting post-secondary education with more credits, substantial inequities exist, specifically first generation, low socioeconomic status, and racial and ethnic minorities. They're less likely to bring credits in when they started an institution. And even the slightest number of dual credits or dual enrollment credits creates momentum both into and then through post-secondary education. They're completing more credits, they're retained at much higher rates, and they complete at much higher rates. So I would recommend really kind of the diving deep into who those students are. And of course, students who started with more than 3 credits finished with fewer student loans. And of course, recommendations, all bureaucrats love giving other people recommendations. I've tried to make these as tangible as possible. But the first one is, of course, I've kind of jumped on this equity bandwagon because I think it's the only way, right, to really move a program like this forward. Examine which students are engaging in dual enrollment opportunities to first identify and then address inequities. And a great way to do this is to look at your free and reduced lunch, and then to look at the students who are engaging in dual enrollment and then compare the two. That's usually a good proxy, right? So examine which students are engaging. The second one is to incentivize teachers' pursuit of graduate work in their respective content areas. So the Higher Learning Commission is the technical institutes and the public universities accrediting body, and HLC has specific instructor qualifications. So not anyone can teach dual or concurrent credits. There's specific policies that HLC has, and the folks at that table are far more expert in that area than I am. But generally, the requirement is a master's degree in the content area or a master's degree in any area, plus 18 graduate credits in their specific content area. So lots of students, or lots of teachers, have a curriculum and instruction master's degree, for example. So that is still applicable. They just have to pursue the 18 graduate credits in their content area. So if I'm a math teacher, I'm pursuing 18 graduate credits in math. And recommendation 3 is something, right, like my undergrad's liberal arts. I was a speech and debate teacher, right? I taught literature. I didn't necessarily know when I was an English teacher that I would come around, but the data are just so compelling to this fact, right? Pursue integrated general education and career and technical education, 9 through 14 and beyond pathways comprised of about 6 to 12 or more dual or concurrent credits, right? Those are good starting points for students' pathways, both to and through post-secondary education. And the criticalness of general education and career and technical education is important, right? Because we hear soft skills all the time, right? And we generally assume soft skills with liberal arts. But the career and technical education really affirms a student's pathway, or it doesn't, right? So say a student they dip their toes into the water here and they say, oh man, I'm just not into health sciences, and they pivot. That's still a step in the right direction, right? We'd rather have them find out in a dual enrollment course than actually matriculating in a post-secondary institution. So 9 through 14 and beyond, 6 to 12 credits. So with that, I'll conclude my dissertation. I don't know what my time is, but we got a maybe defense here. So yeah, what can...
First of all, I can't speak for the entire board, but I'm sure I could say that we are huge fans of dual credit. And I was just thinking at the health sector breakfast, I had brought up the issue that we are aware of the study as well, and that are concerned because we see this as an opportunity for our students and for both entities, the Southeast Tech as well as the school district, to partner to provide opportunities for our students to do this. And I guess what I would ask from you and Nick and your team to help us, because when my husband served in the legislature, you have 300 bills and there's all these issues. If there could be a one-page summary that kind of just says, hits these
Sure.
key terms, brain drain. That's the one we always hear, brain drain in South Dakota. And how many of our students then stay in South Dakota and work or go to institution who do take these dual credits?
Right.
That might be an important factor that I think addresses that. And the other thought, you talked on the loan amounts dipping. A 3-credit college costs this much, 3 credits this costs this much. Just use that comparison, and then the average student loan is 20 years, so that difference, how much is that over 20 years? And just like a one-pager like that, I think would help us people who don't live in your world
Right.
to better understand that and give that one, that elevator speech to
Right.
our legislators.
Right. You don't think you would walk into an elevator with that report, right? All right. No.
Depends on how many
We hear
floors
that,
there
right?
are.
And our board actually recommended that as well. So
Okay,
we're working on
perfect. Yeah.
an executive summary of my executive summary of my
Yeah.
executive summary.
No,
So, but we
No,
agree,
this is all
right?
very helpful
Yeah,
and
you
good and
bet, you
everything,
bet. Mm-hmm.
but just those little points, because, those are the terms we keep hearing is workforce, brain drain, and that is like, how can, and if it hits, that little speech hits all those things, I think
Right.
that would be helpful.
Yeah, you bet.
I was just going to add, I think that the dual credit conversation and the concurrent credit conversation, it really starts with even our middle school counselors, and especially our high school counselors. And so I think that that's a focus that we, at least here in Sioux Falls, and I'm sure other districts too, we need to support, because we have students who obviously they're 8th graders and they're coming into high school and they don't know what to take. And we can talk to them about the speech.
Right.
Don't take it as a freshman, take it as a dual credit when you're a junior or senior. And so there's so many families and students who don't know that. And again, talking about the sector breakfast last week with healthcare, I know one of the aha moments that the gentleman from Avera had was just the overall, the students who are in the Avera Academy, just their lack of knowledge about how to navigate that process. And so it's not that they are not capable of taking higher education classes. It's not that they don't have the intelligence or the skills. It's they just don't have the knowing of how to navigate. And
Right.
so if we can help them with that early on in high school and get them into those right classes, we can help them then to choose. They don't know what tech school is.
Right.
They come from maybe a country where they only had universities, and that university system is what they know. And so how can we help them to know that there are lots of other options that can really be very helpful for their family's income, for their family situation, benefits, things like that. And so I think looking back, at what can we do to help, I think that's really starting earlier on. And if we can get a student take speech class, that's 3 credits right there. And so you're already in that zone of the 2.5 or the 0 to, I can't remember what
Right.
numbers were, but
Yeah, you
I
bet.
mean,
Yeah.
you're helping with, then they take one more class. Now we're at the 6,
Right.
And so I think it's just plugging away at some of those and trying to make some of those progresses with students and helping with the education piece of that can go a long ways.
Yeah, there's a strategy to dual enrollment, right? And for folks who have navigated post-secondary education, they can see the strategy, right? Like they remember taking the speech 1 class and like, man, if you could just knock that out, you wouldn't have to do it your freshman year, right? But you've got to have a parent or you've got to have a guardian that's savvy enough. And the students who could really benefit don't necessarily have that. So I agree. Yeah.
So you mentioned that we'd be seeing legislation this coming session. What? I mean, is something to
Yeah.
worry about or something to advocate for?
Right. I think anytime you can affirm the value of dual enrollment, it's a great opportunity. The dual enrollment program has grown so rapidly that I think folks see the dollar signs attached to the dual enrollment. What we know is you just see the initial investment, right? You maybe don't see the long term because it's far more complicated to quantify. So data like this certainly support it. So we would love to have your kind of walk alongside of us in the advocacy of dual enrollment globally. At this point, we don't necessarily know what that legislation looks like, but the Legislative Research Council, which is essentially they do the policy and the research analysis for the legislator. They selected the high school dual credit program, right, as their program evaluation. So they've been analyzing it over the summer. LRC will release that report on November 18th. So if you want to put that on your calendar, something to look forward to. But we've been carefully watching that and thinking about what are the next steps. I think that executive board meeting on November 18th will be a good signal for what's to come during the session.
Yeah, and continue to encourage and challenge the employers that have employee shortages in these technical fields to help do some of the marketing
Right.
for you all, the certification programs, the mentorships that can take place to help fill those employment gaps.
Right. Yeah, I mean, certainly back mapping from labor to post-secondary education to dual enrollment is a critical step. And I think an area that Southeast Tech in particular has really led in this area through their construction technology certificates, right? Those credit marks that, again, can affirm a student's pathway and momentum, again, to and through post-secondary education. So I think STI, for example, is a great case study of that. So I agree. Industry is a strong partner, right? And their voices are generally heard by the legislator. So,
Very interesting. Thank you.
yeah, you bet. Thanks for letting me present. We appreciate it. Yeah.
Do you have a motion to approve the report on the analysis of dual enrollment?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and second. All those in favor of the dual enrollment report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
President Mickelson, I just wanted again to express our thanks to Scott for making the trip over and providing that additional information. The concern I think that we have at this point is that there may be potential funding reductions in the upcoming legislative session that'll be proposed as is anticipated to be a tight budget year as well. But the value of this program, and I think the study shows that, and I think there are a couple other points too I just wanted to stress to you all the importance of, for instance, the Avera Academy, the Sanford Classroom to Career program, because as you saw in the data, first generation students of low income and underrepresented populations, diverse students, take the fewest dual credit courses, and really those programs, both the Avera Academy and Sanford Classroom to Careers, are focused on providing access and opportunity to those students. So I think that really is a program, or both pilot programs. This fall we hope to work with the community and continue working with the Sioux Falls School District to expand and grow. And just as a recap maybe on some of our totals, I know we talked about this at the last school board meeting, but last year I think at Southeast Tech 5% of our credit generation was dual credit based, and this fall it is 11%. So we are doing more dual credit, certainly with more strategic partnerships, and hopefully building those pathways for students again, not only from high school but on to 2-year and to 4-year educational opportunities. So again, thank you for the time and for allowing Scott an opportunity to present the findings. So,
Thank you. Madam President and School Council, my name is Steve Williamson. I'm Director of the Foundation. I'm going to present a little bit on our sector breakfasts that we've been having, that some of you joined us for last week. Forgive me if I am a little slow. I'm sporting my first pair of bifocals here. I'm trying to figure them out. So the sector breakfasts kind of grew a few years ago. They were kind of the idea of, they were the idea of President Griggs and the exceptional leadership at Southeast Tech. Start listening to various areas of various sectors within the Sioux Falls economy to find out what Southeast can be doing better, and what can we learn, and what can we share. How could Southeast get better and then serve the workforce in a better manner, and not just to assume that a lot of persons in higher ed sometimes assume they know everything about what's going on in the world. And I think that says a lot about the humility and the strength of Southeast Tech, that it brought people in and basically asked them to tell them, what do you think of Southeast Tech, and what can we do better? So I think that says a lot about the leadership. Our last one was on October 24th, and it was, as has been mentioned, it was we kind of worked with the health sector, had incredible turnout We were hoping for 40 to 50, and we had closer to 120 plus. We had folks that came all the way down from Pierre. The head of the Department of Labor was there. Obviously, all the major hospitals and medical institutions were involved. And a lot of the surrounding K through 12 schools had persons there too. Our biggest emphasis was how do we engage underrepresented populations better, but that was not obviously the only topic that we talked about and was addressed. It was moderated quite well by Dr. Dave Kapaska, who's the interim director of the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, and we had Jill Franken, who's the Sioux Falls Public Health Director, Diana Vanderwoody, who's HR. She has a really long title, so I won't do the whole thing, but she's HR with Sanford Health, and then also Dave Fleechek, who's the president of Avera McKinnon Hospital, so on the panel. So kind of a rock star panel, to say the least. Healthcare in Sioux Falls continues to provide significant opportunities. We know that it's our largest employers at all levels of education, but currently we all know that about a third of our students who are graduating from high school are not going on for any kind of post-sector, post-high school, higher education or anything of that sort. So we obviously, that's an opportunity to go and help grow workforce development, things of the sort, and engage these persons in a meaningful manner to come into the higher form of workforce. Conversely, accessibility to higher education is obviously a growing concern. There are some statistics out there that say that South Dakota potentially has the worst student debt problem in the country right now. It depends on the source, but we do know about 3 out of 4 students who do come out of, and these are things that come up obviously at our sector breakfasts, but about 3 out of 4 out of our students who do come out of college do have some form of student loan. And that's the highest in the country. It's kind of a battle between us and New Hampshire. So meeting these challenges of accessibility to higher education, ELL services, English language learning services, mentoring, counseling, those type of things were definitely talked about as a concern at the health sector breakfast. One issue that really came up a lot that honestly I don't think we were even expecting was the discussion and how much it came up about the need for more persons in behavior health and addiction recovery. Avera is obviously doing a lot of building there and has been a real champion in this community when it wasn't exactly the kosher thing to do to really try to address behavior health. As just a side note, so I moved back to South Dakota, and I ran into Judge Schreier, who's a federal judge here in town, and I had not seen the judge for about 4.5 years, and I ran into her at the chamber event, and I said, what is the largest, what's the thing that's changed in Sioux Falls in the 4 years I've been gone? And she said the number of cases she sees coming in front of her for fentanyl and opioids and things that sort, and behavioral health. She said it's just absolutely changed dramatically in the last 4 years. So I think that was something we were really surprised with as we discussed right afterwards, how much behavior health and addiction recovery came up. And obviously this industry is very supportive of the Build Dakota program. And we feel very lucky that continues to be a major factor in assisting students go into not only this industry, but a lot of other needed industries in South Dakota. Some recommendations that came up for Southeast to consider enhancement of our ELL and first generation services at Southeast. Continued growth of opportunities for high school students interested in healthcare that can lead to employment pre-matriculation credit, like we've talked about today. Potential degree opportunities for behavior health. Something we need to think about is if that is something we want to consider, and obviously grow the number of scholarships and grant opportunities to assist students who have significant financial need. Higher education, no matter what level, is difficult to do if you don't have access to capital. It's like anything else. So we need to always be growing our scholarship base and things that sort that we can provide for students who are interested in coming to Southeast. We highly invite you to join us. We will make sure that you're on the mailing list. We're making sure all the legislators are on the mailing list. We have some sector breakfasts scheduled for the rest of the year. Next week, we'll have horticulture, landscape management, and turf management. There's a major shortage of workforce in that industry, so that'll be November 14th. We'll have a legislative, and we just set that date, I believe, for December 17th for the legislative sector breakfast. We will schedule a manufacturing sector breakfast for winter 2020, and then we're also looking at one for the insurance industry. We've had some interest in that discussion of, I guess, what would be called the silver tsunami that is coming to the insurance industry, not only for your general folks at State Farm, but also your larger suppliers and the issues they're having in finding skilled workforce in the insurance agency. With that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Hi.
Stephen, you really scared me seeing me asking a question. The legislative one, I think it'd be awesome if we would invite also, or if you guys would invite, like, you know, Dave Fleechek with the Avera Academy is so complimentary, and I mean, they really want the dual enrollment. They're very in favor of Diane and David Rosenblum, because I think, and Dana Dykehouse with him being president of the Board of Tech.
Mm-hmm.
It would be awesome to have them all there with that little sheet we're going to get from Scott, putting the full court press on them.
Okay. I agree with you.
Yeah.
We will definitely reach out to them in a personal manner to see if they would be able to join us that day.
Thank you. And these are just great events that you all are putting on, and great way for us, you guys to be responsive to what the community needs and wants are, and being able to change when those needs change.
I think one of the things I've been most interested in that I've seen since coming to Southeast is the ability to be nimble, the ability to address issues when they come up in workforce. It's really been, actually, it's not only interesting, but it's quite fun to be a part of.
And as of late, just getting to see you all in the news with the cell towers, building those in partnership with Vicor and getting that G5 out it's just a testament to your nimbleness.
Thank you.
So thank
And we can thank the president and them on that. They did a great job, and that just really came around in the last year. So that's a real good example of just being nimble and addressing an opportunity that was needed here in the Sioux Falls.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the sector breakfast update?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other matters to come before the board? Seeing none, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. So moved. Second.
Motion and second. All those approved signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Right.
Did you show him that?
Yeah.
I'm so.